Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my dear friend and co-host, Jake LaQuire. We have a lot to break down today, and it's going to start with the Panthers' loss in Denver. And it was a fast start for us, shockingly. We went up 7-0. We forced a turnover, and things started to look right. But similar to last year, and it gave off vibes of the game similar to when we went down and played the Miami Dolphins. You go up, you have a quick lead, you feel excited, but you feel like it's not going to last. And sure enough, we went down 28-7, and the final score was 28-14, with that last touchdown coming in garbage time. What was the big takeaway? There's a lot to get into on both sides of the ball, but what really caught your eye?
And it's funny you mentioned the Miami game because I was actually going to start my segment with that. Like it felt similar, right? Miami was I think Miami had just come off of trouncing Denver. I think that was when they scored 70 the week prior. Then we went down to Miami, went up 14-0 with some early good throws from Bryce, and then it all came down. Really similar game there. I was surprised that we forced a turnover on the first drive. Shy Tuttle. I don't think he ever played for Sean Payton. He might have, but if it was a little revenge turnover there. And then we drove down, had a lot of penalties throughout this game. And on that drive itself, we had a penalty that almost knocked us out of the red zone. It was a holding penalty, but we still got back. Xavier Legette scored his third touchdown of his rookie campaign. I was told on Twitter that if Bryce Young was the quarterback, Legette would never score again. So I guess that didn't come true. And we saw Jalen Coker score his first touchdown as an NFL player as well at the end of the game on that final drive. So cool to see some of the younger players show out. Trevin Wallace also forced the second fumble from Cortland Sutton, so he forced another fumble. Good young players playing well. Damani Richardson, the undrafted safety, I thought he made a couple of plays as well. But it was more of the same throughout the game. And like you said, it started off great, right? We saw the scripted drive went well. It was mostly like outside stuff, trying to get the screen passes, receivers involved for Yak. And then the rest of the first half kind of followed suit, but the Denver defense, who was the best defense in the league at the time coming into this game, they still are, if you want to look at all the metrics and stuff. They keyed in on it pretty quickly. And then for the rest of that first half, nothing, right? And then through most of the third quarter, nothing. The second half, I think, changed a bit because Canales was like, maybe we need to take shots downfield. We can't just do five-man slants every play. I got a lot to talk about Canales today. But it just fell apart pretty quickly, I guess, is my main takeaway. And I think when you look at it from an Andy Dalton versus Bryce Young perspective, the last 3 games that each of these players has played, or that they've started rather, Bryce Young's stats, 2 passing touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Andy Dalton in his last 3 games, 2 passing touchdowns and 5 interceptions. So when you're looking at Bryce's horrible first 2 games and throwing this one in there, all 3 games against pretty good defenses, and then what Andy Dalton has done against pretty poor defenses except the Bears game, it's interesting that they're similar given that at this point in the year, I think Bryce had less to work with in the Denver game with like no Deontay Johnson, no Thielen, a lot of guys out on defense. I think the big talking point is this week, especially with Canales not committing to a starting QB this week. What are we looking at moving forward vis-a-vis the starting QB? Because we made a trade today, are we going to see any more trades and that kind of thing? But to stay with the game, yeah, it was just bad after that first drive.
What's interesting is that we go up 7-0 and they have 28 unanswered points. And over the course of that 28 unanswered points, we had 28 offensive plays. Actually, 22 offensive plays, but they went for a total of 28 yards. They had the same amount of points as we had offensive yards during that spurt. And I get Canales started letting it loose, letting Bryce Young throw it deep. Jalen Coker's 1 catch down the left sideline was absolutely gorgeous. I still don't know how he caught that. And he is looking like a true NFL wide receiver, a steal for an undrafted player. Just super, super excited for him. Love that he's in a Panthers uniform and will play Panthers football arguably for the next few years for us. That aside, there's not a lot working well for us. The offensive line didn't do a good job in protection or paving like lanes in the running game.
They got manhandled.
And Chuba didn't have a good day. So when you can't lean on the run game and you're relying on a quarterback who's struggling, has confidence issues, it just wasn't a good mixture. And the couple moral victories you can get out from the end of the game is just, it doesn't make up for the fact that this team has been outscored by negative 147 points on the year through 8 games. We are pacing a point differential, a negative point differential of 330 points. To put that in perspective, the record, NFL record all time, are the 1976 Bucks, who went 0-14, and they had a negative point differential of 287. That's the record. If we go over 300, that is insane. Like, we're supposed to get better, especially on the offensive side. That doesn't feel like it's improved. And on defense, because we sacrifice so much to pay the offensive line, to trade for Deontay Johnson, and none of that panned out. To the fact that we just sent Deontay Johnson out for a bag of peanuts to Baltimore. Like, it's outrageous. Like, you see guys like Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper, some of these wide receivers get traded for late day 2 picks, and we're doing a day 3 pick swap. Like, what are we doing here? Like, this is the title of the episode exactly encapsulates how we feel about this franchise, and it's an unserious one. This is an unserious franchise right now, and I don't know where to go from here. And we can keep breaking down this game, but just putting into perspective just how catastrophic this year has been to start, I don't think we're doing it justice.
Yeah, and I think you said it. It's almost scary, some could say, how unserious it is with the orange lights. By the time you're listening or watching this, it might be Halloween. That's in a couple of days. And I think it's fitting, right? Because I'm not scared to watch the Panthers per se. Nobody's scared to play the Panthers, but it's certainly like a bad omen or disappointing or even cursed. You know, like Halloween has witches, they curse stuff. It's really fitting for the time of year that the state of the Panthers is an unserious franchise. You talk about the 22 plays that we had that produced 28 net yards before, what was it, before the last drive where we scored the touchdown.
Yep.
While they scored
no.
When they scored their 28 unanswered in that
because
range.
Then we had the long drive that I think ended in interception. So yeah, here's the drive breakdown. But before that interception drive, that was where we had 28 yards and 22 plays, which is unacceptable. Like, I get
probably the
touchdown
drives 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right?
Yep.
Yeah, something in that effect. And it was scary. And when you look at these, you're like, oh, 3 plays, 4 plays, a lot of 3 and outs, right? Are we not? We're not running the ball well, and Bryce is throwing short of the sticks, right? If you look at the film of this game, the plays that Dave Canales is calling, he has to throw short of the sticks because none of the routes are going past them. That's why when I talked about in the second half and right before the first half, they actually tried to push it downfield, and it was a perfectly placed ball for Leggett, who he said he lost it in the sun. Let's wear a visor next game. But that would have gone for probably 25-ish, 30 yards. Maybe we got a field goal there. Like I said, throughout the year, our 2-minute offense has been the best part of our game. That probably was a scoring drive, at least field goal, if Leggett catches that. And if you look at the end of the game, we had a 2-minute drive. We went 98 yards. That's neither here nor there. Looking at what Dave Canales called this game, it just perplexes me. There's a 3rd and 14. I believe it's on this I'm pointing at the screen. I know you can't see where I'm pointing, but it's on the drive. It's our 4th drive that ended in downs because we ended up going for a 4th and 2. It's 3rd and 14, and it's a empty set. So all 5 eligible receivers are lined up running routes, and all 5 of them run slants that converge like 6 or 7 yards downfield. How are we going to pick up 14 yards if that's the play call? And I saw some people say, let the play develop. Into what? The players running into each other? We saw that a lot weeks 1 and 2, didn't we? Well, the other time when Bryce was the starter, having Mingo and I can't remember. It was
Sanders, I think.
No, it was Jordan Matthews, I think, when he was still on the team, running into each other at the top of like slants and stuff. Kind of similar there. But when you have stuff like that, when you have a 4th and 2 where the first 2 downs were run plays, got us 8 yards. The 3rd down is 3rd and 2, not a run play, not with Chuba. Chuba got us the first 8. And then on 4th and 2, it's an option play to the short side of the field. What that means is, like, you line the ball up on the hash mark based on where you're tackled, and there's a longer side and a short side. The short side is where there's less yardage. You run an option to that side against the best defense in football, who's fundamentally sound, and they have playmakers, and then it just doesn't work out. I think if you just hand it to Chuba and run it, it works out. If Bryce hands it to Chuba on the option, it probably works out. But it's this weird gimmicky thing. And you talked about this last week. It was a 4th and 1, right? The fullback dive that they give to Chuba, which you can watch film and sniff it out. I'm sure they saw something like this. We're like, what? Just play your gap and we'll stop him here. And they stopped us. In the second half, that's when stuff started going. Like you talked about the Jalen Coker sideline pass down the field. The Bryce aired one out to Leggett. He put it about half a yard in front of him too. But even doing that makes the safeties back up and like have to play. Throughout the second half, when we were doing that, we actually moved the ball. If you look at the drives here, what is it? We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 drives in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 drives. Pardon me, I can't really count. But 3 of them actually go quite the distance down the field. 2 of them end in interceptions. I think one was a bad mistake by Bryce to Jalen Coker. He needs to put a little more air under it. And then the other one looked like a little bit of miscommunication between him and Tommy Tremble on a 4th down play there. But they moved the ball down the field when they allowed him to throw down the field. So why are we waiting the whole game to do this? That's one of my questions. Why are we running Chip Kelly RPO triple option? No, it wasn't RPO, but Chip Kelly triple option stuff that – and when he brought it to the league in 2014, yeah, it probably worked because Michael Vick was there. But like, what are we doing? Like, I don't understand it. A lot of the – and you talk about how Canales says the offense is the same regardless of Andy Dalton or with Bryce Young. Is it? Because Andy Dalton's been able to throw to Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen for 1 game. And this game, it's down to Xavier Leggett, Jalen Coker, David Moore, and Jonathan Mingo. I actually was hoping Mingo would get some touches in this game because the depth chart was like down to it. We carried 4 receivers. That's another thing I take issue with is only having 5 receivers on the roster. But he doesn't get any catches. He had a couple of targets. David Moore played well. Leggett played well. Coker played well. But other than that on offense, I'm not super inspired. From the Bryce Young standpoint, he played much better than weeks 1 and 2, but still not like franchise caliber QB level play, especially when for most of the game, if you look at drives 2 through 6 there, they're not like Canales isn't even letting him attempt that kind of stuff. And if we're going to go down sinking, let him air it out. You saw like with the Coker catch with some of that stuff that he's able to at least attempt those passes. You got to at least try that when you're facing one of the best defenses. Like, I don't understand what this like gimmicky offense is in the first half. I don't know.
You don't trust Bryce necessarily to drop back and just throw it deep, then get him out on some play action bootleg.
Right.
Let him air it out deep to a Coker or Leggett and give them room from a schematic standpoint to go make a play after that. Like that's the play designs I would love to see from Dave Canales, and we're just not seeing those interwoven currently with the offense. And it wasn't with Andy Dalton, just as it hasn't been with Bryce Young. So I don't know if we are going to see them the rest of the year, but that's what's going to help. It's going to help when you can marry the run and the pass, when you can get Chuba going and allow Bryce Young to have easier completions to start to feel confident earlier in the game. So when you need him to air it out even more in the second half, that he can do that. And so we'll see if that changes moving forward. Again, Canales is still iffy on who the quarterback is. And if your whole point of having Andy Dalton in was so you could evaluate a guy like Deontay Johnson and you just traded Deontay Johnson, then I think it just makes sense to play Bryce Young the rest of the year and evaluate him that way. So there is no questions next offseason of whether or not he is your quarterback. Like, you know, for a matter of fact that is the direction you're not going to go. But you learn that through another year of Bryce Young being the quarterback. So hopefully that's the takeaway on the defensive side of the ball. We did a good job stopping the run, but at what cost?
We did a good job stopping the run at the end of the game, I think. Early in the game, like Jaleel McLaughlin, Javonte Williams, they're getting like 8 yards a clip. And I get what you're saying at what cost, because the middle of the field was not even just the middle of the field. Everybody past the line of scrimmage was wide open the entire game. Mike Jackson got destroyed by Cortland Sutton. I think J.C. Horn was on him for 2 routes and no completions on those 2 routes. One of them was a PBU. J.C. Horn is second in the league and PBU passes defended by a DB. Maybe put your best cover guy on their best receiver instead of trying to like get cute and match him up against one of the taller receivers just because like size, height, whatever. I don't know, but like the coverage was just awful. And granted, the second touchdown that Knicks threw was a great play by the tight end Troutman, the one-handed grab at the back of the end zone. But they were just getting pieced, and it was mostly. It wasn't mostly. It was all in the second and third quarter because they didn't score at all in the first. We actually had a 7-0 point differential at the end of the first because their first drive we forced the fumble. The second drive is a punt because we got a sack on Bo Nix on third down that moved them out of field. I think they were actually in field goal range, but I don't know why Sean Payton decided to punt. Either way, for the first quarter, we did our job. The offense scored points, the defense held up, but the defense isn't good enough or deep enough, especially when you don't activate Wanham. When Dane Jackson, after coming back last week, doesn't play this week. When Jaden Crumedy, our 6th-round rookie, still isn't ready. When a lot of these guys are still out, they're not deep enough to contend for an entire game, especially against a guy like Sean Payton, who knows how to find mismatches. He did it the entire second, third, and even fourth. He was trying to do it in the fourth with double passes and fake field goals and stuff. We stopped him on the fake field goal, excuse me. But yeah, this was just another bad day for the defense. You talked about the point differential there, and I can see the offense scoring between 14 to 20 a game, but this defense, man, that's going to be the key to us breaking that the record that everybody wants to have, right? Point differential or points allowed is another one too. I'm sure we're on pace to be the worst defense ever in that regard. But yeah, this defense, man.
It's bad. I mean, like the fact that you have a guy like Kurt Benkert doing a whole video breakdown of Bo Nix and talking about his elite traits after this game. I mean, this is what quarterbacks do. I mean, Bo Nix hadn't thrown over 250 yards. He hadn't had a 3-touchdown game. Granted, he's not even halfway through his rookie year, but hadn't hit some of those milestones. And he does both of that in this game against Carolina. Like, it's just like, as much as I want to get like some solace in the fact that we could be playing Spencer Rattler at home. Maybe we have like a little bit of our ego hurt and we play for pride against the Saints. I'm not so sure about that. I feel like Rattler has struggled, but maybe he has this rookie performance that has people talking like, oh, he's the truth, that people should have taken him higher than the 5th round. Like, that's what I'm afraid the narratives are going to be this time next week. And that's just, I don't see that changing. We got some of those guys back from injury this past week. Granted, did we get DJ Wanham back? No. Did we get Dane Jackson back? No. But we have guys like Jadeveon Clowney, A'Shawn Robinson, and leaders on that defensive line that were supposed to be big, key impact players, and they haven't done that this year.
Josie Jewell, too, played in this game. He was back. I thought he had a pretty good first half as well. But yeah, the point being, like, unless we get all those players back and like 3 or 4 new people in there that are like average NFL level players off the street, it's not going to happen. That's my point. The defense isn't going to get much better. And like, it's going to be a rough watch the rest of the year. Like you said, our next game is versus the Saints. Do you remember how many points they scored in week 1 when everybody, DJ Wanham wasn't healthy, excuse me, but when everybody was healthy? Do you remember? It started with a 4 and ended with a 7.
Yeah, 47.
So like, this is when we had Shaq Thompson, when we had Derek Brown, our defensive captains. Granted, Sam Franklin wasn't there at the time. He's back now, but still, this is when we had everybody. So maybe we can get Wanham back. Maybe we can get Jordan Fuller back. Maybe we can get all these people back. I don't know if it's going to lead to wins necessarily, unless we do play Rattler, because he did look rough this past week versus the Chargers. They had to bring Jake Haener in. Main takeaways, like, I don't know, man. Like, from here, and it's only week 8, or I guess we're in week 9. I don't know where we are going to go from here. I hope we can get a second win just so we have we didn't regress from last year, which would be embarrassing. But yeah, I just don't know. My main takeaway, I guess, is let Bryce Young play actual football. Let him throw down the field, because at least next week we aren't facing as big or as strong a defense as we did last week with the Broncos. We only had they only had 2 sacks against us, which I think speaks more to Young getting the ball out, getting outside the pocket a bit more than he did in the first couple weeks. He didn't. There was one play, and I'll say this, and that'll be the time to move on, where he rolled out to the right, and it looked like he, like versus the Chargers. Remember when he rolled out to the left and was looking to throw downfield, and then just got blasted for like a 20-yard sack? Mm-hmm. There was one that was almost like it, but after seeing nobody open, he threw it away. And That at least that's progress. He looked closer to 2023 Bryce Young, who I don't want to say he was a gunslinger, but he looked like he played within himself, didn't care what play in and play out. He was willing to keep going. Those first 2 weeks, he just looked timid. He looked a little bit better this week than he did those first two. I guess that's my main takeaway.
I definitely agree with that sentiment that he looked more like the 2023 Bryce compared to what we had seen prior to this past week. So that I guess is a step in the right direction, even though it was supposed to be a progression and evolution from that. That was supposed to be the baseline.
It looked like he was getting away from what Canales was trying to do in the first couple of weeks and get back to Frank Reich's sculpting of him, which is a dastardly thing to say.
We might be missing right come the end of the year. I don't know. Because last year, I just want to put this in the perspective. We're already at, like I said, a negative 147 point differential 8 weeks into the year. All of last year, it was 180. That was the point differential. So we're only 33 points away from that. And we're not even halfway. We're about halfway through the year. So halfway through this next game against the Saints will put us at that mark. But it's just rare company that we're in. And then you add insult to injury. Dan Morgan, like I said earlier, you see all these other premier wide receivers go for day 2 picks, and you do a little day 3 pick swap with the Ravens, and you still eat the majority of the cap. Like it's not like you're offloading cap. Maybe you'll go sign somebody else or trade for somebody else real quick that you think will be more of a long-term solution at another position. Like there's none of that. And it's just, how are you going to rebuild this team through day 3 picks? Like Jalen Coker, you hit on those guys like once every other year kind of situation, whether it's a day 3 pick, an undrafted guy, you can't count on those being like franchise changing moves. And at least with a 3rd round pick, we would have had a dart on the board, maybe ammo to move up or move back in a trade and really gain something of value. And we didn't here. And that's sad. Yeah.
And we didn't I know we got their pick, but it was a swap too. So in terms of ammo to move up and stuff, we didn't gain a pick. We just moved up 20 or so spots, pending compensatory.
I don't even know if it's 20 spots.
Well, I'm thinking comp picks, they'll throw 10 of those in and stuff. The Ravens will probably lose in the AFC Championship. We'll be one of the worst teams. So yeah, maybe 10, 15 spots.
Yeah.
But in terms of ammo, the point I'm trying to make is we didn't gain an extra dart. We just got one that's a little bit less dirty, I guess. Or you moved one speck of dust off of it, and that's the new dart in terms of using it to trade up. So we didn't really gain anything from it. We actually lost when you look at us having to pay the rest of his salary. So that's kind of an iffy move at best. I guess they wanted him out of there, and they're like, all right, yeah, we'll do this. By the way, they said there were multiple suitors, so I can't believe that this was the compensation you end up with. But it ends up being the Ravens, right? And I think that's an interesting team to segue into around the NFL, because the Ravens were kind of in a barn burner against the Cleveland Browns, who coming into the week were 1-6. There were a lot of 1-6 teams that came into the week. The Browns won, the Patriots won, the Panthers didn't win, but those 2 teams did. And so following Zay Flowers tripping in the end zone on the Hail Mary, following Rashad Bateman dropping, must have been like a 40-yard pass down the field where Lamar had to run around and create.
I think he dropped a touchdown too earlier in the game too.
And I know this isn't going to help their DB room, but 17 dropped interceptions from Jameis Winston. They trade for Deontay Johnson, and it's interesting, right? Because coming into the game, yes, the Browns offense, we expected it to improve, but I certainly didn't expect them to score, I think it was 29, and win the game. And so as far as with the Browns trajectory from here and the Ravens trajectory from here, I think it's interesting that the Ravens are all right, we just lost. We need to go out and bolster our receiver room, get a receiver 3 or something like that in response to a loss like this. And then the Browns, are they kind of on the come up? They're only 1 game behind the Bengals now for 3rd in the division. It's just interesting to think about.
Well, it's interesting also considering Joe Burrow was like, oh, you need to win about 10 games to get in the playoffs. There's 9 games left. Yeah, we can go win 7 out of our next 9 games. Dude, you're 3-5. Your team sucks. You're not.
He is not 2016 Rodgers, RELA. He's not him.
Relax, guys. Relax. No, yeah. So With that being said, I think what I like about this move is the Ravens went into the year really excited with what they had in Rashad Bateman, and he's been able to stay healthy. He's always been able to get open during his time in the NFL, but he struggles to catch the ball. And Deontay Johnson isn't necessarily an upgrade in that department, but I think having a little bit more competition in that room, just having more guys that can separate on the field, are just going to create so many mismatches across to where Lamar Jackson and Todd Monken can propel this offense and this team to maybe a Super Bowl berth. Because right now they are struggling on the defensive side. They need to find an identity from a schematic standpoint because they have the talent. They have the talent on the defensive line. You have it on the second level. And it's just getting those guys to play cohesively together. So hopefully John Harbaugh can get those guys playing well. I think some other good topics to touch on with around the NFL. It comes down to the actual Hail Mary. I know you referenced Lamar Jackson made one, but I think they were within the 40-yard line of the Browns when they were driving there. In this case, launched it from his own 35-yard line. Jaden Daniels sent it a prayer down to the end zone, got tipped up by Stevenson, who I think Tyreek Stevenson made a name for himself in this game, and right into the hands of Noah Brown for a stunning victory, come from behind for the Commanders against the Bears. Now, the Commanders were up like 12-0 for a good portion of this game in the fourth quarter, third or fourth quarter, until DeAndre Swift kind of broke it open and made it a one-possession game. What were some of the key takeaways there? It was definitely a choke job on a lot of fronts from the Bears. What stood out to you the most?
Well, it's an interesting game, right? Because this is week 8. Week 8 of last year, we were coming off of a bye week. The number 1 and number 2 overall pick QBs face off, and the home team ends up getting the win on the final play of the game. Bryce Young did outplay Stroud that game. One of the few games that he outplayed the other team's QB. And then this week, Washington hosts the Chicago Bears, number 1 and number 2 overall pick QB, and they win on a, granted, much more spectacular final play than the Texans trying to go off sides like 5 plays in a row on an Eddie Pinheiro field goal attempt. So I think my main takeaway is, like you said, the Bears kind of choked throughout the game. They were getting dominated the whole game up until I think it was a 56-yard DeAndre Swift run. That's when it broke the game open. They could have scored another touchdown, but they tried the refrigerator Perry trick and had a backup O-lineman in there who just fumbled the exchange between him and Caleb Williams. They could have, I don't want to say put the game away there, but they could have been close to it. And granted, the Bears, they drive down and score again, but getting too cute with the play calls there. It kind of reminds me of the Colts game earlier in the year where they lose. And it's but they had another 4th and inches, 4th and 1 goal line situation. And they run like this little outside scat play to DeAndre Swift instead of running it up the middle. Just stuff like that. And then Eberflus, I don't want to put it on him that Tyreek Stevenson is talking about with his fans about his parlays and stuff like that while the play is happening. By the way, yes, he's the guy who tipped it to Noah Brown. I can't believe he's still on the team right now. Like, I would have practice squatted him or something. Like, a lesson has to be taught there. But I can't really put it all the way on Eberflus there, but poor execution, that comes back to the head coach. And then Caleb Williams just didn't play well, probably for 58 minutes of this game. Like, the key guys there, Eberflus, Waldron, Caleb Williams, not coalescing and bringing this win together, I thought was not embarrassing, but very disappointing. I picked the Bears to win, mainly because I thought Jaden Daniels wasn't going to play with the rib. He ends up playing, and while Washington doesn't blow the doors off the roof off the stadium by any means, I thought the Bears had a chance. They're certainly more talented, I think. I thought they were more well-equipped to win in this game because Jaden Daniels has struggled against stronger defenses. The Bears have taken advantage of not top-tier defenses, and it was the opposite. And I think when it comes down to that, it is disappointing to look back on when this is a game that they could have, maybe should have won, especially in a very, very tight NFC North race where the Lions have won 6 games, the Packers have also won 6 games, I believe, and the Vikings are 5-3 or 5-2. This was one that you could stay even with them, get a leg up on the Vikings, you drop it, and it's just disappointing.
It's definitely disappointing from the Bears standpoint. I think the issue really comes down to the fact that they didn't play complementary football.
Mm-hmm.
Early on in the game, I mean, the fact that you hold the Commanders' offense to 4 field goals, that it's only a 2-possession game at most going into the second half is huge. So credit to the Bears' defense, credit to what Eberflus is doing on that side of the ball. On Waldron's standpoint, yeah, the refrigerator Perry play call was head scratching. Definitely not the time and place for it. If you're up big against the team, you're in front of the home crowd, you're on the goal line, do that kind of stuff. Because at that
Johnson.
point, and that's where it's just know the situation. Like when it is down to the wire, you give the ball to your playmakers. Why? Because they're the guys that are going to go get you a bucket. And we saw that on the ensuing drive when they handed it off to Roschon Johnson. And I think you pulled up, and this was prior to us recording, but I think every handoff that Roschon Johnson has gotten within the 5-yard line this year, he's scored a touchdown. And so you just got to know who you're supposed to hand it off to in those situations. Don't get too cute. And then with Caleb Williams, for the first 3 quarters, it was abysmal. I mean, he's missing wide open guys. He has playmakers around him, and he's got to make plays. And so it was a learning experience for these guys. Hopefully they can rally because the schedule only gets harder for the Bears moving forward. Now, for the Commanders, this kind of moral victory, this kind of just victory in general, hopefully will propel them to an NFC East title. They're projecting that way. I really think it's going to be a race between them and the Eagles. And the Eagles look really, really good right now. Granted, they just played the Bengals. You got to kind of pump the brakes expectations on that. But this is one of those situations where I think it's a two-headed race. And those are the two where the Bears are really at the bottom of the NFC North. And this game did them no favors.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I think they do have the talent necessary to maybe sneak into a wild card. But when you drop games like this, especially on a miracle play, it can be deflating. So we'll have to see what they do this week. They play.
So Jameis Winston wasn't the only quarterback to lead a 1-6 team to a victory this past week. We have one other game in the around the NFL, and you know what? The Jets are going to Jets. They are a sad, sorry franchise. I was thinking about this afternoon. I wasn't sure if it's worse to be a Jets fan or a Panthers fan, but like those two franchises are just weighed down by just poor ownership. And this Sunday, I mean, for a team, the 3 criteria for the 756 games, for those of you who are aware of the stat we're about to rally off, it was holding your opponent to less than 250 yards, not turning over the ball, and scoring 20 or more points. Prior to that, 756 consecutive wins by the team that did that. The Jets are the first team, the very first team to lose in that kind of situation. Rodgers is a curse in and of itself. Like when he did his darkness retreat, he needed to come to the I guess conclusion that he needed to retire because his legacy I don't think would be nearly as marred as it is now by trying to continue to play football for a sorry franchise and for a infrastructure that is bowing down to him and not building around him. Like look at what Matt LaFleur did in Green Bay around Aaron Rodgers. He didn't like it, and now he's getting his way, and it's not going according to plan.
Well, I would say that he would go to an NFC title game next year with the Vikings, but they have a QB of the future, so I'm not sure they're going to be too keen to welcome Rodgers onto their team after they see all the stuff going down here. You brought up that 756 consecutive games. It wasn't even with Drake May for most of the game, who's been, I think, played quite well in his 2 games in like 10 minutes that he's been on the field. Jacoby Brissett came in and led them come behind victory to score the final touchdown on a 4th and goal in the 4th quarter. It's embarrassing with the Jets. And I wrote the Jets down here because I want to talk about kind of their franchise throughout the entire year. So they started 2-3. It was 2-3. I remember I got that wrong on the episode, but they started 2-3. Since then, they're 0-3. They fired Robert Saleh after that start. We were surprised that he was the first head coach fired. They after that, they lose a game, immediately trade for Rodgers' guy, Devontae Adams, who has not lit up the stat sheet much of at all. I think what his biggest impact has been allowing Garrett Wilson to face more corner twos, corner threes, that sort of thing, because Garrett Wilson's played much better since they got Adams. So if that's what they were looking for, that's a boost, but I doubt that's what they were looking for there. The Jets are 2-6. Just for shits and giggles. The draft order right now is your Carolina Panthers, 1-7. The Tennessee Titans, who are 1-6, who they don't look good either. The New England Patriots, the team that just beat the Jets, and then the New York Jets, wielding the 4th overall pick if the season ended today. Steven, this is a team
4-4 last year through 8 games.
This was a team that was supposed to be a Super Bowl contender this year. They do the sensible thing in the draft, and they draft Olu Fashanu to be a backup O-lineman when they need him. He has played this year because they have needed him. He's looked good. They trade for Devontae Adams to be the missing piece. They just aren't getting it done. And under Robert Saleh, they looked better last year. Here's an interesting stat for you. Of all the QBs, and there's been like 50 of them, that have started games for the Jets since the start of last season, do you know who has the most wins?
Zach Wilson.
Zach Wilson has 4 wins as the starter. Aaron Rodgers has 3, and that's if you count the opening night win last year where Zach he played Wilson all won. Of 2 seconds and, destroyed his Achilles. Yeah. How are they not winning when they upgrade with Aaron Rodgers over Zach Wilson? Like, what is the problem? You said, what is it worse to be a Panthers or a Jets fan? The Panthers are like on a continual downslide right now. I think we've hit rock bottom now. The Jets have been down there. They've been down there for the last like 15 years. They hold the longest playoff drought of any NFL team since 2010. I don't think they won a game in that year either. They have to go way. They did. Championship oh, you're right. Yeah, I don't know how I forgot, but yeah, you're right there. Since then, they haven't been to the playoffs at all. I think the Panthers and the Broncos are sneakily in second and third there, following that the Super Bowl for the Broncos, and then we went in 2017. Neither here nor there. The Jets franchise, man, you said it, an unserious franchise just like us, and it can't get any better because Aaron Rodgers has, at least our owner is to blame. We know it's Tepper, what he did in the first 5 or so years. Maybe he's reformed himself and won't fire Canales and Dan Morgan after 6 games or 9 games, whatever we have next. But Rodgers is taking over that franchise. I think a large part of why Robert Saleh was fired was he and Rodgers clashed heads. We saw in pressers that they didn't necessarily get along. We saw the clips of them shoving each other on the field and Saleh having to do damage control. No, that's like brotherly camaraderie, stuff like that. I don't know, man. This is supposed to be a Super Bowl team to them. They're all in for a Super Bowl. I don't know what their level on the all-in scale is. That's in terms of spending for this year and next year, but it's got to be super high. I saw Jason OTC on Twitter, who's a noted Jets fan, talk about ways that they could free up money for next year. It involves trading people like Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, some of these young stars that they have, because the way that they've gone all in now, only for it to yield no returns or even worse returns than it did to this point last season, it's just disheartening and embarrassing for that organization.
It is. I don't know where you go from here from the Jets standpoint. They at least have, I would say, blue chip talent on both sides of the ball. I have a lot of concerns about the Panthers having that kind of talent on that side of the ball. Both are going to have quarterback issues here coming up that they haven't been able to solve through the draft or the free agency over the past half decade. So it's one of those situations that if one of them hits on a quarterback, obviously their trajectory is going to go up and the other is just going to kind of stay at the bottom. I'm going to be very lenient on saying that the Panthers have hit rock bottom because we said that last year and it's only gotten worse. So,
you're talking about big, largest scoring deficit all time. So to me, that's rock bottom.
Yeah, we're on pace for that. It's just more, I want fingers crossed because if something worse could happen, the Panthers are lining themselves up to do it all. And I don't know what's going to happen. We talked about one of the teams here that was towards the bottom of the draft, or towards the top of it because of their record being so bad. And that was the Tennessee Titans. And they had a piss poor performance against the Lions in Detroit. They actually had it fairly close in the first quarter or so.
Yeah, surprisingly in that first quarter. Calvin Ridley's first quarter was 120 yards and 6 catches.
I think it might, one point it was 14-7, 14-14, but the Titans were actually impressive. I was wow, could this be one of those upset like victory situations because the Lions had just had a big performance against the Vikings the last week. Maybe they were riding a high, and no. 3 quarters in, didn't matter the fact that they didn't pass the ball at all. They dropped a 50 burger within the 45
3 quarters. Yeah.
45 minutes. Like it's insane. They were doing it on special teams, on defense, on offense. They were getting everybody the ball, and it just seems like Ben Johnson in this offense is clicking. Dan Campbell has these guys playing hard and together. And even though that they are dealing with the Aiden Hutchinson injury, they're still getting it done on the defensive side. And I think that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good segue into, like, we're going to do a halftime report for the season. We talked about it at the progress report after week 4. Looking at the best teams this year, and you talk about how they're doing it without Aiden Hutchinson on defense. I don't think it matters, even if their defense takes a step back, if they're going to be able to score these ludicrous amounts. Obviously, they're not going to be able to score 52 every week within 3 quarters, but man, they just look on fire. To me, they're like the best team in the league, like bar none. And we'll have to see moving forward how they can face, I guess, better teams, because the Titans necessarily aren't one of the best. They do have the Packers, I believe, this week coming up, and then the Texans, 2-6-2 teams. So those will be good challenges for them. But as far as best performing teams go, especially right now, the Lions are the easy number 1 team to me. And then somehow the Chiefs are still undefeated, and they just look so boring. Panthers fans talk about, oh, you got to make it more watchable. The Chiefs are not watchable, but man, they get it done somehow. You want to look at statistics? They're number 1 in success rate on offense, which just, it looks bad. Mahomes is playing bad. He leads the league in interceptions, but they get the ball down the field and they score touchdowns with the 2019 Pro Bowl squad. So as long as they're doing that and winning games, I don't think anybody cares how it looks on the television set.
Yeah, they knew they had issues at wide receiver. They're still waiting for some of their guys to get back kind of healthy. They traded for DeAndre Hopkins. He had a catch or 2 in this past game against the Raiders. Like you said, they lead the league in success rate. They're really good at moving the ball and churning out yards, but those big splash plays we're expecting to see with guys like Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice, who obviously is out for the year with an injury, they just really aren't there. And so you just wonder how long this will be able to kind of be sustained. It was very cool on the defensive side. They went out, they traded for a guy like Josh Uche, trying to get some more pass rushers in the building, get after the quarterback. They are a very complete team. They are the best team, in my opinion. I know you think the Lions are, but they've won back-to-back Super Bowls. They're the last remaining undefeated team. There's just like an element of like, if you're really going to pit Mahomes and Reed against anybody in a must-win situation, I'm going to take them every single day, like 10 out of 10. Like there's just no reason not to because of the track record with those two. So I think when you start getting past the Lions and the Chiefs right now at this halfway point, you get the teams like the Packers and the Ravens and those teams that have shown a lot of good things on tape, are trending in the right directions. There's just question marks on a couple sides of the ball. Like for the Packers, it's can Jordan Love stay healthy? And when he is healthy, can he stay away from boneheaded decisions with like teams like the Ravens and even the Bills? You wonder if their defenses are going to perform well enough in high critical situations. And so with those flaws and those kind of teams, it'll be interesting the rest of the way to see who's able to kind of fix those issues, what issues kind of are damning and kind of end a few seasons, and who really comes out on top. Because I know, and this is jumping a little bit ahead, your Super Bowl pick before the season were the Lions and the Chiefs, with the Lions winning. And it's trending that way. I can definitely see a Super Bowl where those two teams are in it.
Yeah, for sure. And you talked about teams like trending in the right direction for the teams we think are playing the best right now. I think the Packers, even without Jordan Love, are able to get it done, and that gives me faith in them that they're going to be one of those competitive teams down the stretch. The Ravens just go and trade for a receiver. Maybe they trade for an edge rusher or something like an Uche to help bolster their team. You talk about the Deontay Johnson trade being for peanuts. Josh Uche for a 2026 sixth-round pick is huge for the Chiefs. I think that was a steal from them. That was a guy I wanted us to sign in free agency. But then another team that's up there that might be on the downturn, I think, is the Texans. They do rattle off a win here, a close win, or let's not call it a close win.
It was a 3-point victory, right?
But Yes, score-wise, yes, but I feel like the performance from one of the quarterbacks in that game, who we learned today has been benched for the veteran Joe Flacco. I'm talking about Richardson, obviously.
Well,
It
when you
wasn't.
take yourself out for a play, you
Yes, yeah,
deserve
you,
that.
yeah,
Like Cam Newton and Luke Kuechly was saying this, I think, on Tay Adams' show. But in essence, like Cam Newton was tired all the time. He
yeah,
still went back to the huddle, called in the play, and he did it again. And like
yeah.
that's what you got to do as a professional athlete.
And you can't say that when your O linemen are like eating dirt, what, 70 plays, 75 plays throughout the game. That's just, I don't know. At least I wouldn't admit that I took myself out of the game because I was tired. Obviously, we're referring to Anthony Richardson in his post-game presser saying that we had thought he had gone out for injury, but he said he needed a breather. We've been running all game. Everybody runs all game. So you can't say that. You deserve the benching, at least for a week. Back to the Texans point, because we were talking about teams trending up for best performing teams. Texans are still 6-2, but Nico Collins is still on IR, and we learned today that Stephon Diggs has torn his ACL and he will be out for the rest of the year. I actually thought they were going to be a sneaky team to trade for Deontay Johnson. Maybe they can trade for, or if there's any more receivers out there, because Christian Kirk, who was also floating around the trade market, broke his collarbone in this past game. So the wide receiver trade market's kind of drying up. Maybe Adam Thielen is the guy they go after. Who knows? But they're a high performing team, just trending in the wrong direction for me. And then we get to some of the surprising teams of the year. You can't not talk about Washington, right? This was a team that we had very low expectations for. They were 6-2, leading the division. I wouldn't surprise me if they rattle off one, maybe two playoff wins if they get a lucky matchup. And it's all off the back of Jaden Daniels. I don't think we can talk enough about him, but we've talked plenty throughout the season and in this episode. So to get to the other surprising team for me, the Denver Broncos. I did not see this defense being as dominant as it has been coming into the season. Last year, around this time last year, a little bit before, the Stephens gave up 70 points in a game, which is it could have been worse. Like Sean Payton complained about them running up the score. Mike McDaniel had the backups in the entire fourth quarter. It could have been way worse. But for them to bounce back from that, string together some good defensive performances at the end of last season, and come into this year, keep Vance Joseph there, keep his staff there, keep everything together, and play fundamental sound defense that just smothers players and smothers offenses. I didn't see it coming. What about you? Like the Broncos? I know you were much higher on them than I was coming into the year, but did you see this kind of performance from them?
I don't know if I saw them being a top 5 defensive unit. After the 70-point drubbing, their defense was a key factor in them winning games down the stretch, which I think led to an 8-9 record. Mm-hmm. They were a competitive football team. I just was very, and I still am. I have a lot of questions about Bo Nix and the offense. Like, just that is a still big, like, I don't think that's going to win you games in high leverage situations against playoff contenders. So we'll see if that's the case. The Chargers in that same division underneath another culture builder in Jim Harbaugh, like that is very interesting to start seeing the AFC West have 3 really good coaches, and Andy Reid, Sean Payton, and Jim Harbaugh. I'm very intrigued to see over the next couple of years if the Broncos and Chargers are able to rebuild their rosters, if they're able to compete with Reid and Mahomes. So just 2 guys and 2 teams to really keep an eye out for. I think they are surprising compared to expectations. You talk about teams that are kind of going up and down. We've talked about the Texans and Jets kind of being on that downward trajectory, where these other teams are really, they did a good job in the offseason of identifying where their weaknesses were, what they wanted to prioritize this offseason, and moving forward, I think they put themselves in a position to keep winning football games. So we'll see if that's the case. I think the biggest underperforming teams outside of the ones we've listed that had higher expectations going into the season, talked about the Jets ad nauseum. The Jaguars are up there, and so are the Cowboys. Those are 2 teams that I think had playoff aspirations this year, and I think they're pretty much done at this point. The Cowboys might be able to sneak in as a wild card. I don't think they have enough firepower to win the NFC East. And again, another disappointing loss against the 49ers on Sunday night. They rallied, almost made it a game, and Kyle Shanahan's known for his choke job. So there were a lot of narratives swirling around at the end of Sunday Night Football, but the conclusion is what we expected it to be, with the 49ers having the advantage and the Cowboys right now being under 500. And so I think that puts McCarthy on the hot seat. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's fired in season. We had that conversation a couple weeks ago when you thought, and you had the bold take of saying that the Cowboys would miss the playoffs entirely this year.
Yeah, you talk about coaches that are on the hot seat too. Doug Peterson with the Jags, he barely saved himself with that win in London over the Patriots. But I think you had a take that the Packers would annihilate them, and they did. We talked. I think it was on Thursday when we did the emergency episode with Bryce being the starter about this Cowboys and 49ers game. And at the end, I asked the question, "Who do you think needs it more?" For me, I said the Niners needed it more. Because their expectations were much higher than the Cowboys, at least in my opinion. With Shanahan there and with everybody coming into the year, everybody was healthy except for McCaffrey. I think the Super Bowl was the expectation for them. They got the win that they needed. And now that division, you talk about like close divisions, the Cardinals are leading it at 4-4. Then it's like the Seahawks and Niners are also 4-4, and the Rams are 3-4. The only reason they're behind is because they've had their bye week already. So that's a really competitive division where they needed the win. I think you said the Cowboys were the one that needed this win more, and they just underperformed. This has been a theme all year that it seems like they get blown out in the first half and have to kind of claw their way back in the second. I don't want to say close, but like they get within reach and then they just run out of time or they run out of gas.
What's funny is they were up 10-6 at halftime. That's the crazier part.
Like, I know, yeah.
It was the third quarter that the 49ers kind of blew it open. But yeah, one of those things where you have a game and you just can't stay in it.
Yeah, talking about like teams that have traded for people and stuff like that, they need a running back. They need a lot of stuff. But certainly one of the most underperforming, disappointing teams at this halfway point, up there with the Jaguars, with the Jets, and certainly like the Titans and the Panthers, the one-win teams.
I'm shocked that the Cowboys didn't call the Panthers and said, "Hey, we'll send you a 4th-round pick if you eat the salaries for Miles Sanders and Deontay Johnson, and we'll take both of them off your hands." Like I'm personally
that would have been a better deal, wouldn't it? You know. But
you would have cleared some cap space. You would have gotten a higher draft pick. You would have done a pick swap. But that's neither here nor there. I think it's a good time to segue into, because we've been talking about kind of halftime report, who's been the best performing teams, who surprised us, who's underperformed. Let's get into the awards. And I think it starts with the MVP leaders. We've talked about a couple of these guys already, but I think Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson have kind of stated a claim. I think the other guy that needs to get thrown in there is Josh Allen. The Bills are one of the better teams in the AFC, and it's because of what Josh Allen is doing. I mean, if you had told me that he would be performing like this, and granted, they've traded for Amari Cooper, but what Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir have done over the past couple of weeks has been nothing short of impressive. Makes you almost think about the Xavier Legette, because Xavier Legette, I think, is on pace for about 450 yards. Keon Coleman might actually go over 800. So just total different guys in terms of what they're providing so far in their careers. But those are the three that I think are the best in terms of staking their claim for most valuable player. Do you think one is better than the other? Do you think they're all kind of at the same level? Is they're the true MVP at this point in the season in your mind?
For me, it's still Lamar Jackson. Even with this week's blunder, nothing was on him. He was making the right plays, just the receivers weren't there. He was off to an excellent start this year. You talk about Jaden Daniels bringing this team to where it is. I think you have to mention him as well. Not sure with he's suffering from the numbers curse. He doesn't have the numbers the other guys have, so he might not win it, even though Lamar Jackson won it last year. So who knows? But I think Josh Allen does deserve to be up here. And you talk about what he's been able to do so far. I'm looking at the efficiency. I'm looking at him taking care of the ball. He had no interceptions the first 6 or 7 weeks coming into the year. I think he finally got one in this past week.
Seattle,
I didn't watch the game, but I saw some of the clips and stuff like that. He's been taking care of the ball very well, distributing it to a lot of people. You mentioned Shakir, the rookie Keon Coleman. They just bring in Amari Cooper. They finally got the tight ends involved this week on National Tight Ends Day. Hopefully that's a trend of what's to come and not just a 1 week thing. Like every tight end scored, except the Panthers tight ends on National Tight Ends Day. But I think all three of these guys are really strong argument for MVP. Like you could bring up Baker, who has the most touchdowns, I believe, still following this past week, but the team isn't performing as highly as these three teams, all three 6-2 teams as well. So I like all of those guys there, and I think that that's the definitive list. Coach of the year, I think, is much more interesting because I'm still on the Dan Campbell train. I think the Lions are the best team in the league right now, but you can't really discount the Chiefs. They're undefeated, right? And then some of the guys that you wrote up here, Dan Quinn being one of the architects of this surprising Washington run, and Kevin O'Connell. This was a team a couple weeks ago that was undefeated, and they dropped a couple, but still performing at a high level.
I think what's interesting when we talk about Dan Quinn here is he went into Washington. He knew exactly the direction they wanted to go. Adam Peters, they bring in from San Francisco. On their board, they have Jaden Daniels as their number one guy. And he goes, okay, who would be really good to kind of install an offense? And he goes to Cliff Kingsbury, who had just gone back to the college ranks to kind of coach for a little bit after his tenure with Arizona Cardinals. And they have been on a tear recently. They were able to sign the right veterans. Got a guy like Frankie Louvu from Carolina, Jeremy Chin too. Just some key veterans all over. And you could go down the list because they got Tyler Biadasz, Dorrance Armstrong, Bobby Wagner, just all these guys where it was very much like hodgepodge, like grab a guy for a need and hope for the best. And the best has come to fruition. I would say at this point now they're approaching average on defense, and they're one of the best offenses in the league, and that's going to win you games, and hopefully that just continues. With Kevin O'Connell, I thought they would be one of the worst teams as well, just like the Commanders, and what they've been able to do on both sides of the ball despite a lack of talent has been impressive. So if you're seeing it strictly from a coaching perspective, I think those two guys I would put above Dan Campbell personally, and the only reason I would say that is because I think Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn are more responsible sometimes for the success on both sides of the ball, even though Dan Campbell is the leader. And he does deserve his roses. I don't want to take anything away from Dan Campbell, but when everybody is harping on what Ben Johnson is doing, I would be very curious to see if this offense even looks remotely the same if Ben Johnson gets hired next year.
For sure. We talked about Ben Johnson being the guy for Washington, and him not going there, and it ended up being Cliff Kingsbury, who, by the way, has earned himself a college head coaching job with what he's done this year. Could you have imagined that the Washington offense would be, and I'm not sure if it is after this week still, like EPA wise, but the number one EPA offense in the league and not the Lions, given those two coaches? I certainly couldn't. For me, Dan Campbell, like their team was firing on all cylinders at all three levels, not just offense, not just defense, not just special teams, but all of them. And when you take that into account, he is the head guy. For me, that's it. You could also put Matt LaFleur in there. I think he's an interesting one as well, especially with I wouldn't call it adversity because Malik Willis has played well in Jordan Love's stead, but him being able to step in, go 2-0, 3-0 if you want to count this week, even though he wasn't the starter, and them not miss a beat. I think that speaks a ton to what Matt LaFleur is able to do from an offensive perspective. And he brought in a better defensive coordinator as well. Offensive player and defensive player of the year. These are more nitpicky, I think, than the other two awards. For offensive player of the year, I think Jahmyr Gibbs deserves recognition, but everybody in that offense is eating, right? Derrick Henry, somehow again is on pace to break 2,000 yards. I think if he does that, you got to hand it to him again.
Especially
and then
at his age, nobody at his age has done this. So I think there's like an element of you just have to give King Henry the award. If
give him his flowers.
Even at 1,800 yards, I would give it to him. Like he breaks 1,500, I think he's got it in the bag. You start hitting some of those higher numbers, you just lock it up. I think another guy that you can throw in there, Jamar Chase. I think he's leading the league in receiving yards. I may be wrong, but he's up there in terms of just being a productive guy. But I think a running back will probably win it this year. On defense, like you were getting to, I think Dexter Lawrence, Will Anderson are guys on the defensive line I would lean. But there are two defensive backs who played for a specific college that I think are deserving of their roses as well.
Yeah, and you bring up Will Anderson, that makes three of them, right? The Alabama defenders this year, I think, have really been eating. Xavier McKinney, the Packers safety, and Brian Branch, the Lions safety, I think are doing yeoman's work on the back end for each of those two teams and have really contributed to those two defenses being better than they were last season. If McKinney breaks 10 interceptions, and he's already got 6, to me, like to me, 10 interceptions is more impressive than 15 sacks. That's something you don't see like very often at all. There's always one or two 15 plus sack getters every year, but like when's the last time we got 10, 11, even 12 interceptions, what he's on pace for in a single season? I can't remember it. But what Dexter Lawrence is doing as well from a nose tackle spot, leading the league in sacks, cannot be overlooked. If he can approach 20, like I don't, that's hard to leave out for me. But a lot of good contenders on both sides of the ball awards this year, in my opinion. And now the big one, it's not an award, but at the start of the year, we did Super Bowl picks. I had the Lions over the Chiefs. I think those are the two best teams. I'm going to stick with it. And I think you had an NFC North team over the Chiefs as well. Are you sticking with your initial prediction?
For now, I am, just because I'm happy with what Matt LaFleur, Jeff Hafley, the Packers offense and defense looks like at the moment. I think Packers over Chiefs is still a good take. We'll see if they're able to round into form as the season goes on. I think what we're seeing with the Lions is they're definitely hitting their stride. But is this the time of the year that you want to be hitting your stride? And I'm worried that if teams start kind of figuring out tendencies, are able to slow down some of these trick plays, that if they're not able to evolve come the postseason, that's what sets yourself up for an upset. But again, being as dominant as they are, I think the Lions are still a really, really tough team and one of the better teams in the NFC. So moving on from Award Watch, we'll kind of talk about, I think, MVP players and candidates more regularly throughout the year. We'll probably touch on some of the other awards as we get closer, but just a good halftime checkup as we approach that marker in the year. And so we want to, I'm blanking right now. I'm looking at the notes. We've cut out different segments because we're going over time.
This would have been a 2.5 hour pod if we kept everything. And I don't know if I have it in me for 2.5 hours. So I think we need to talk about the Panthers game this week as the most pressing thing to wrap up this episode. It's a revenge game because I presume Bryce Young will be the starter this week. I can't imagine they would go back to Andy Dalton. I think going back to Andy Dalton at this stage in the season, not only are you getting like an 8th round pick for Bryce in a trade at that point, just like, I don't know. I feel like the fan base is kind of going to give up on what Canales is trying to install, all that kind of stuff, because they were brought in to be the Bryce fixer. And at least from what Bryce did this week versus Andy Dalton's past 2 or 3 weeks, it's like the same, if not a little better. And so I think you need to keep him in there for the continuity, especially if you can get some of the players back from injury. Get Jonathan Brooks to play at all, because both Jonathan Brooks and Jaden Crumedy, our 6th round defensive lineman pick, they aren't activated to our roster this week. They aren't activated at all this year because they're approaching the end of that 21-day window. So hopefully we get to see Jonathan Brooks here. Is one of our mascots there with you? Is that where you keep looking down?
Yeah, we're over the hour mark. If you made it this long, you can tune in. I have Ginger here who's wanting all the love and attention right now. But continue about our offensive woes and needing Jonathan Brooks to get
offensive woes, defensive woes. Yeah, I think she's going to try out to be the next Serper. Who knows? This might be a good audition tape. But revenge game. We don't know the status of their quarterback either. Like, we have our own issues there. Derek Carr is still coming off. I think it was a neck injury, if I recall correctly. And so if we get Spencer Rattler back in there, he has not inspired me in the least, coming off, at least going back to the Buccaneers game in the garbage time when he was able to do some, or in the second half, second quarter, when he was able to do some things before Todd Bowles just started firing blitzes at him and he just didn't know what to do. If he plays like he did versus the Chargers, I guess is my point, we might have a shot. Now, here's the thing. Our defense is far from the Chargers' defense. It's one of the worst, if not the worst in the league. I can't believe we're not the lowest in sack rate. It's somehow the Atlanta Falcons. But we need people to come back. That's like the crux of this game. We mentioned Jonathan Brooks and Crumedy. DJ Wanham, will he take his first snaps as a Panther? Will Jordan Fuller be back? Will Dane Jackson be back? I'm not sure what happened with him. Maybe he had a setback, because Dane Jackson played 2 weeks ago versus Washington, but not this week. And we need it after what Mike Jackson was going through. Will Adam Thielen be back? Is he on the trade market still now that Deontay Johnson is gone? Or will Bryce have like a steady veteran there to catch some of those third down balls? We know the connection they had last year. If you can add what we did last year and add Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker into it, I think that's a pretty good upgraded receiving core, even without Deontay Johnson. Clint Kubiak has also not performed well outside of those first 2 weeks. So that'll be a chance for Ejiro Evero to get one back. And like, I know how we're the get right team for a lot of teams. Maybe their offense is the get right game for our defense. And then the final thing that I want to talk about with this game, the longest losing streak in the league right now does not belong to your Carolina Panthers. It belongs to the Saints. After that 2-0 blitz that they had, I think they scored 40 versus the Cowboys as well in week 2.
They dropped 44 on them.
44.
Yeah, they were on a tear.
They've cooled off. They have lost their last 6 games, longest streak in the NFL. The second longest streak does belong to your Carolina Panthers, and the New York Jets were actually tied with that one. Both 5 games in a row that we have lost. Obviously, the Jets, I don't even remember who they beat back in week 2 or week 3, excuse me. They've rattled 5 straight losses. They fired a coach in between there. They have their own problems. But us, it was when Andy Dalton was inserted into the starting lineup. We go to Las Vegas, catch them by surprise, blow them out of the water. But ever since then, it's been setback after setback. And we might be back to Bryce for good. We might be with Andy Dalton. I don't know. Point being, whoever loses this game will probably be in sole possession of the longest losing streak. I can't put it past the Jets that they'll keep losing, but this is a big game for both teams.
It's a big game for both teams. I will say after that 2-0 tear, they had a couple close games. Then you have the Derek Carr injury, and then Spencer Rattler just hasn't really been the answer. But when you looked at who the offensive starters were week 1 and where they were, I want to say a couple weeks ago before the Chargers game, they literally had like 3 out of their 5 starting offensive linemen out. Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed out. They had cut A.T. Perry. Derek Carr was hurt. When you lose all those guys, it's going to impact the offensive efficiency you're putting out. I think a lot more of the concerns on the Saints come on the defensive side. They've had poor tackling, just poor coverage, but they've also gone against quarterbacks that can take advantage of those poor issues on the defensive side. I mean, we're talking about losses against Kirk Cousins, Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield. I'm not really going to say Bo Nix is all that, but Justin Herbert is a really good quarterback in this league. And so when you're looking at those guys, I don't put Bryce Young necessarily in that stratosphere. I think it really does come down to this being a revenge game, this being personal, and them just having to find a way to win. And you got to just, if you got to drag them in the muck and just play bad football together, then do that. If that's what's going to put you in a position to maybe win the game in the fourth quarter. Our defense can't stop anybody for really anything. So I think this is one of those things that if Spencer Rattler is going to have a get-right game, this is going to be it. I still think I'm leaning Saints here in this one. This is definitely a winnable game, but between now and our bye, I definitely see us losing both to the Saints and the Giants.
Yeah, I actually, looking at the rest of our schedule, if you want to extrapolate or maximize our schedule for the rest of the year, this is looking like maybe the most winnable game for us. It's at home. The first blowout game we had was in New Orleans, in the Dome. So we're already there. But, I mean, our home games aren't necessarily home games. Who knows? The Saints fans don't travel as well as some of the other teams we have had to face at home. So that's one thing there. Number 2, we're wearing our black jerseys. We haven't worn those yet. We've worn our white jerseys every game but one so far. So that's another leg up there. Maybe we wear the all black. Who knows? I doubt they do it because it's a 1:00 game, though. And then number 3, like you said, if this is a grinded out classic Ron Rivera 7-6 game, I like what the defense showed us from a run stopping perspective last week, the steps they took, and possibly getting people back. I think that is a plus for us there. But our coverage has to improve. Coach Evero has to mix some stuff up back there, because if Derek Carr's back in, yeah, we're getting torched. But I think if we see Spencer Rattler, if we see Jay Kaner, we actually might have a chance in this. And I'm not going to pick us right now because I think I've gotten every pick wrong where I picked the Panthers so far this year. So I'm not going to do that yet, but I'm keeping my eye on it. As far as perfect takes go, last week, my take was that we would hit the under, which actually went up on game day to 40.5. It was at 37.5 when Bryce was installed as a starter. Went up. We still
that Coker
went
touchdown.
Over. We still
that
went
Coker
over.
touchdown.
Yeah.
It comes out of Bryce.
I'll take losing the perfect take if it means Jalen Coker gets his first career score. I'll take it. So I was wrong. You said it was a top or would be a top 10 worst EPA performance, net EPA since 2011. I don't think it fell into that category
No.
because 28-14, at least scoring wise, would not reflect such a bad net EPA blowout. Is that the case?
I think if the Broncos had scored again, gone up 35-7 instead of turning the ball over, and then maybe forcing another Bryce interception, it might have gone up in that stratosphere just because of how bad the middle of the game was. But you're right. A 28-14 loss is not a top 10 worst performance according to EPA. It came in around top 50 since 2011. So still a bad loss.
Didn't make it on the graphic, though. That's huge.
No top 30, no top 10. So I was wrong on there, which is good. Again, shows improvement. That's what you want to see against a really good team, is that at least eke out a okay loss and not just I felt like after the Commanders game, we were done. And that at least showed a little bit of life on the team. So moving forward, going to this week's Perfect Takes, my perfect take is, and every single game that we've lost has been by 10 or more points. The current spread against the Saints is a touchdown at 7 points. They were a touchdown underdog against the Chargers and lost by 10 or more. I think they come into Carolina. This is a get-right game. Like you said, they're on the longest losing streak in the NFL. They need this game, probably more than a lot of teams right now, including the Panthers. And I think they get right, and they get a dub on the road. So we'll see. I think it's going to be by 10 or more. So if you want to bet that, you would just change and find an alt spread. Again, not betting advice. Just, again, every single Panthers loss has been by 10 or more. If the spread's starting at -7, that seems like a little bit of free money.
So is your take that they're going to win or that it's going to be by 10 or more?
It's the Saints are going to win, and it's going to be 10 or more. And that's
so your take is 10 or more win?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I had my take, but we're going to have our first head-to-head take of the year. I think the Panthers will beat that 10-point spread that you're laying out there. So I think.
So not even the 7-point spread that the NFL is giving. You think it's going to be by.
Well, I want it to be a head-to-head thing. We haven't had one of those yet this year. But yeah, I think it'll be within a 10-point game. We might even pull off the win there. I was going to go with every person that we named in every award. The winner is going to be from somebody we named today. But I think the head-to-head direct perfect take will be better. So I'm going to go, it's going to be a 10-point game. Within 10 points either way is going to be my take.
There you go. So you heard it from me. I'm the doubter. I don't think we're going to win.
I'm the believer.
Jacob's got a little bit of faith in this team.
It is Halloween, and we have seen spooky, strange things happen around this time. So I wouldn't put it past the team wearing the black shirts around Halloween to get it done. But I think that's going to wrap it up for us. It was a nice halftime report this week. I know we kind of ran long. It would have ran longer if we actually went over everything we had prepared, but we'll move some of that stuff to next week. You can follow us on Twitter. We post all the graphics that we have here that the YouTube people are able to see. So if you're just listening, you can find us on Twitter at @perfect_takes. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Next week, we might move the podcast date to Thursday because it is election day next week. Be sure to go out and vote. It doesn't matter who you're voting for. The fact that we have the right to vote is huge. So go out, do your civic duty, and we will catch you guys next week. For myself, for Steven, this has been Perfect Takes, and keep pounding. The Panthers are going to win this week.